A simple woman walked into a luxury store, wearing old sneakers and a plain hoodie. One shop attendant sneered, "This place isn't for broke people like you. Get out before I call security." But she didn't yell. She didn't argue. She didn't even flinch. She just kept browsing. Calm, quiet, like she belonged. Because what they didn't know, she wasn't just any customer. She owned the brand. Before we start, hit that like button and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now let's dive into the story. She walked slowly down the shiny street, where glass windows showed handbags worth more than cars, and heels clicked like clocks on marble floors. Her shoes were old. Scuffed white sneakers with worn-out laces, the kind that had walked through more life than most of the people inside the fancy stores. Her name was Liana. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy, just a simple girl with calm eyes and a soft smile. She wore jeans that had faded at the knees and a plain gray hoodie. Nothing about her screamed money, but there was something about the way she moved. Quiet, steady, that felt unshakable. As she passed one of the biggest stores on the block, Marivel Luxe, she paused. The golden letters above the door sparkled, like they were made to keep people like her away. It was the kind of boutique that didn't show price tags, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Still, Liana stepped inside. The air changed the moment she walked in. The smell of expensive perfume, the hush of soft jazz playing from hidden speakers, and silence, the kind that follows someone unexpected. A woman behind the counter raised an eyebrow. Two other staff members glanced at each other, then at Liana's shoes. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she just didn't care. Her fingers brushed along the edge of a velvet display table. Her eyes took in the delicate bags, not with hunger or envy, but something deeper, like she was looking for something real beneath all the shine. A man in a suit glanced at her from a corner, then leaned toward a coworker and whispered something. They both laughed quietly. But Liana kept walking, no phone in her hand, no camera, no crowd, just one girl in old sneakers, stepping into a world that didn't think she belonged, and she knew it. She just wanted to see how they would treat someone who looked like her. As Liana walked deeper into the boutique, the eyes followed her like shadows. They didn't speak at first, but the judgment was loud. One saleswoman, tall with sharp features and red lipstick, narrowed her eyes and folded her arms. Her name tag read Vanessa. She leaned against the counter like a queen guarding her throne. Behind her, another younger assistant whispered, "She must be lost." Vanessa didn't whisper. She looked Liana up and down with a smirk. "Some people really think they can just walk in anywhere these days," she said, loud enough for Liana and everyone else to hear. Liana stood by a shelf of leather wallets. She gently picked one up, turned it in her hand, and smiled at the craft. Vanessa scoffed. "Those aren't for touching," she snapped, walking over in quick, sharp steps. "They're for buying." Liana looked up, her expression soft but steady. "I'm just browsing." "Browsing," Vanessa repeated, like the word was an insult. She looked Liana up and down again. "Do you know how much that wallet costs?" "Probably more than your entire outfit." A few customers nearby glanced over. Some looked uncomfortable. One woman quietly stepped away, sensing tension. Still, Liana stayed calm. She didn't shout. She didn't explain herself. She simply placed the wallet back carefully, as if it were made of glass. Vanessa shook her head, speaking louder now. "You know, we get a lot of people like you, pretending, taking pictures, touching things they can't afford." Liana didn't reply. She turned and walked to another display, the new winter collection. The fabrics were soft, elegant. She ran her fingers across the edge of a coat. "Unbelievable," Vanessa muttered. "This isn't a thrift store. We have standards." Liana took a deep breath. She wasn't here to fight. She wasn't here to argue. She just wanted to see how far they'd go, how people like Vanessa acted when they thought you were nothing. What they didn't know was that this girl in old sneakers wasn't lost. She was watching, and she was waiting. Vanessa's heels clicked sharply against the marble as she followed. Liana through the boutique. Her voice, louder now, was no longer just rude. It was cruel. "Excuse me," Vanessa said, stepping directly in front of Liana. "This place isn't for broke people like you. Get out before I call security." The room went quiet. One customer gasped. Another woman awkwardly looked away, pretending to browse a pair of heels she clearly wasn't interested in. Even the younger assistant behind the counter shifted uncomfortably. But Liana didn't move. Her face stayed calm, her eyes steady. She looked at Vanessa with the quiet strength of someone who had heard worse before and survived it. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she said gently. "You don't have to," Vanessa snapped. "You're making the store look cheap just by being here. And the way you're dressed," she looked her up and down again with disgust. "You probably don't even know how to pronounce the brand name." Liana stayed silent, not because she was weak, but because she was measuring how far this woman would go to embarrass someone she didn't know. Vanessa suddenly raised her phone, turning the camera toward Liana. "Everyone take a look," she said, her voice loud and mocking. "This girl is clearly just here to pretend. Can't afford anything but still walks in like she belongs. Unbelievable." Liana blinked slowly. She wasn't angry, not yet, but something inside her shifted. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been made to feel small, because of their clothes, their shoes, their silence. Vanessa turned to her co-worker and laughed. "She probably shops at flea markets. I don't even know how she had the nerve to walk in here." Still, Liana said nothing. She didn't need to defend herself, because soon the truth would speak for her, louder than Vanessa ever could. Vanessa was enjoying herself now. Her words had turned into a performance. With the phone still in her hand, she angled the camera to make sure Liana's outfit was in full view. "See this?" she said loudly to no one in particular. "This is what it looks like when someone walks in just to pretend. No money, no class, just vibes." She laughed like it was all a joke, a cruel, mean-spirited joke, the kind that cuts deeper because it's done with a smile. Liana stood still. Her hands were at her sides. Her face was unreadable. Not angry, not embarrassed, just quiet. And that quiet scared people more than shouting ever could. The younger assistant at the counter looked nervous now. She leaned over and whispered, "Vanessa, maybe you should stop." But Vanessa ignored her. "You know what's funny?" she said, pointing to the expensive bag on the nearby display. "That bag costs more than her life savings." Liana's eyes shifted toward the bag. It was sleek, black leather with gold accents, hand-stitched, a symbol of luxury. She stepped forward. Vanessa stepped in too, blocking her. "Put that down," she ordered sharply, her smile disappearing. "You're making the store look cheap." For a moment, everything froze. Liana looked at her calmly, then slowly reached out and picked up the bag. Not like someone trying to prove a point, but like someone testing something. Vanessa's face turned red. "Are you serious right now? I told you to put that down." Customers were staring now, some with sympathy, some with curiosity. One woman even pulled out her phone, this time pointing it at Vanessa. But Vanessa didn't notice. She was too busy playing the villain in a story she didn't know had already been written. Liana turned the bag in her hand slowly, her fingers brushing the logo stitched into the corner. Then from the back of the boutique, the sound of fast footsteps. A door swung open, and everything changed. The footsteps grew louder, crisp against the marble floor. A man in a tailored navy blue suit rushed forward, holding a tablet and wearing a look of urgency. But before he reached her, Liana's mind had already drifted, not to the shouting, not to the bag in her hand, but to a memory. She was 12 years old again, sitting cross-legged on the floor of her mother's tiny sewing room. Scraps of fabric were piled high, and the air smelled like thread and lavender. Her mother, sleeves rolled up and fingers marked with pinpricks, was sewing the hem of an old jacket. She smiled without looking up. "One day," she had said, "you'll make clothes better than these. But promise me something, Liana." Liana, clutching a notebook full of doodles and dress sketches, nodded eagerly. "What?" Her mother paused, then met her eyes. "Be kind, even when the world isn't." That moment stayed with her. Through the long nights she worked as a cashier to save for design school. Through the insults from classmates who thought her style was too simple. Through the years of rejection, letters before one boutique finally gave her a chance. She never forgot. Even now, standing in a store filled with gold fixtures and cold hearts, her mother's voice echoed in her mind like a song only she could hear. Be kind, even when the world isn't. Liana looked back at Vanessa, who still stood firm, lips pressed into a thin line, unaware of the storm that was about to fall on her head. The suited man reached them and stopped right in front of Liana. His expression shifted, immediately from stress to relief. "Ma'am," he said, bowing slightly, "your private suite is ready. We apologize for the delay." The room went silent. Vanessa blinked. "Wait, what?" The man turned, confused. "Is something wrong?" Liana finally spoke, her voice soft, calm, but suddenly very powerful. "No, everything's perfect," she said, handing him the bag gently. "I just came to see how your staff treats people when they think no one's watching." Vanessa's mouth opened, but she had no words. The room felt frozen in time. Vanessa stared at Liana like she had seen a ghost. Her arms dropped slowly to her sides, the phone in her hand now forgotten. The younger assistant at the counter looked down, pretending to organize bracelets that didn't need organizing. Liana turned to the man in the suit. "Thank you," she said kindly, then looked back at the bag in his hand. "Could you place that in my suite?" "Of course, Ms. Ray," he said, nodding quickly before hurrying off, still holding the luxurious bag like it was something sacred. Vanessa blinked. "Ms. Ray?" she repeated, stunned. Then it hit her, like thunder after lightning. Liana Ray, the name that had been all over the news in the fashion world just a week ago. The young entrepreneur who had just completed the surprise acquisition of several top-tier designer brands under a private group. The face of quiet success. The mind behind a new wave of elegant minimalist fashion. The owner. Vanessa took a shaky step forward. "Wait, I didn't know." "You should have said something." Liana tilted her head slightly. "Why would I need to say anything?" I mean, Vanessa stammered, "I didn't realize who you were." "That's the point," Liana said, voice still calm. "You treated me based on what I wore, not who I am." The weight of those words dropped heavy into the silence. Vanessa looked around the store, suddenly aware of the customers watching. One woman had even started recording. This time, it was her in the spotlight, and it didn't feel like a performance anymore. "You can't fire me," she said quickly, the confidence in her voice cracking. "I didn't know. This is just a misunderstanding." Liana's eyes met hers. "You're right about one thing," she said. "You didn't know. You didn't care to. And people like you shouldn't be the face of any brand I own." Vanessa swallowed hard. Her hands trembled slightly. Then Liana turned, walking toward the private suite, like she'd always belonged there. Because she did. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to yell. The truth was loud enough. As Liana walked toward the private suite, the store felt different, quieter, heavier. The air that once buzzed with quiet laughter and judgment now held only shame and disbelief. The heels that once mocked her with every click were now silent. Vanessa stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, face pale. She was used to being in control, used to her words cutting people down and walking away untouched. But not this time. This time her words had hit the wrong person. The assistant behind the counter, the younger one, looked over nervously. She had said nothing, but guilt washed over her face too. Liana noticed, but said nothing. Some lessons don't need to be spoken. As Liana reached the entrance of the private suite, the manager was already there, holding the door for her. "We're so sorry again for the behavior of our staff." "Ms. Ray," he said sincerely, "it won't happen again." Liana paused before walking in. She turned slightly and glanced over her shoulder. The customers in the store were still watching. A few had their phones out. An older woman nodded at Liana with a soft smile, as if to say, "Good for you." But Liana wasn't here for applause. She hadn't walked in for attention. She had come for the truth. And now she had it. She stepped into the suite, warm lights, fresh flowers, a table set with sparkling water and velvet cushions, everything tailored for VIPs, everything that, an hour ago, the staff never would have imagined she deserved. The irony wasn't lost on her. She sat down, calm and steady, like this had always been hers. And in a way it had been, not the room, but the right to be treated with respect. A right every human deserves, no matter what shoes they wear. She picked up a catalog and flipped through it slowly. Her fingers didn't shake. Her mind was clear. Outside, Vanessa took a step back, realizing this wasn't just a bad moment. It was the moment everything changed. The soft click of the suite door closing behind. Liana seemed to echo louder than any of Vanessa's words had. For a few seconds, the boutique stood still, like everyone was holding their breath. The store manager turned slowly toward Vanessa. His face wasn't angry. It was worse than that. It was disappointed. "Do you realize what you've done?" he said, his voice low but firm. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I didn't know she was important," she said weakly. "She's not just important," he said. "She's the new CEO. She owns this brand now. She has the power to shut this entire store down." Vanessa's eyes widened. "She can't." "She can," he cut in. "And if she wants to fire you, I won't argue." Across the room, customers pretended to shop, but were clearly listening. The mood had shifted. The woman who was recording earlier had put her phone away. But the look on her face said the video had already done its job. Back inside the suite, Liana sat quietly. A soft knock came at the door. "Yes," she said. The manager peeked in. "Would you like anything else, Miss Ray? Coffee? A stylist?" Liana smiled. "No, thank you. I've already seen everything I needed to see." He nodded, unsure whether that was good or bad. "Understood. If you'd like me to handle the staff situation." Liana stood and adjusted her hoodie, still so simple against the elegance of the room. "No need," she said. "I'll take care of it myself." Back in the main boutique, Vanessa was still trying to piece together her dignity when the door to the suite opened again. Liana stepped out slowly, eyes calm, voice steady. "Vanessa," she said, "a word, please." The room went quiet again. Vanessa walked over hesitantly. "Miss Ray, I didn't mean to." Liana raised a hand, stopping her. "Before you say anything, just know I didn't come here to trap anyone. I came here to see the truth." Vanessa looked down. "And now that I have," Liana said, "I know exactly what kind of message this store is sending to the world." Vanessa stood stiffly, her face pale. Her words caught somewhere between her throat and her pride. Liana looked at her, not with anger, but with a calm that cut deeper. "I just wanted to walk in and browse," Liana said, her voice low and even. "That's all. No cameras, no press, just a regular person." In a store, Vanessa tried to speak. "I didn't know who you were." "I know," Liana interrupted gently. "And that's the problem." Around them, the boutique was silent. The soft jazz music had faded into the background, almost as if it too had been silenced by the weight of what was happening. Liana looked around the room, slowly, letting her words settle. "You assumed that because I wasn't dressed a certain way, I didn't belong here. You insulted me, mocked me, recorded me. For what? A few laughs? A power trip?" Vanessa's eyes welled up. I thought—" "You thought I was less," Liana said firmly. "You saw old sneakers and a hoodie and decided I was nothing." She took a step closer, her tone still soft but unshakable. "Well, thank you for the free performance," she said, her smile tight and controlled. "You showed me exactly how some people here think our customers should be treated." Vanessa's tears finally fell. "Please, I didn't mean to be cruel. I've seen so many people come in and waste our time. And how many of them looked like me?" Liana asked quietly. Vanessa said nothing. "I started this brand to make fashion feel human again," Liana continued. "To remind people that style isn't about money, it's about identity and kindness." "You forgot that." Vanessa looked away, ashamed. The store manager stood nearby, watching closely. Liana turned to him. "Make sure your staff is trained better. People deserve more than judgment when they walk through your doors." Then she looked back at Vanessa one last time. "You're fired." The words were soft, final. They didn't shout, but they echoed. And this time no one laughed. Vanessa didn't move. Her body stayed rooted to the floor like the words, "You're fired," had knocked the air from her lungs. Her lips trembled, her voice lost under the weight of her mistake. Liana turned to walk away, but Vanessa's voice finally cracked through the silence. "Wait, please." She took a small step forward. "I didn't know. If I had known who you were, I would have—" Liana stopped and turned slowly. "You would have treated me differently." She finished the sentence for her. Vanessa nodded quickly. "Yes, of course. I would have shown you respect. I would have. But why should respect only come when you know someone is powerful? Liana asked, her voice rising just slightly. Isn't that the problem? Shouldn't everyone who walks in here be treated like they matter? Vanessa couldn't answer. Her eyes were filled with tears now. She looked around, hoping for someone to save her. But no one stepped in. The manager didn't speak. The other staff remained silent. Even the customers were still and watching, listening. Liana reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a sleek black card with gold trim. She handed it to the manager. Send a copy of the store's full employee training program to my office. I'll be reviewing it personally. The manager nodded quickly. Of course, Ms. Ray. Then Liana looked up, not just at Vanessa, but at everyone in the room. Let me make something clear, she said. I didn't build this company to cater to the rich. I built it for the ones who never felt seen, for the girl who walked in with a dream and got laughed out of the room. She paused, and in that pause was power. I was that girl once, she continued, and I swore I'd never become the kind of person who forgot what that felt like. Vanessa's tears spilled over. I'm sorry, she whispered. I hope you are, Liana said gently. Because today you didn't just lose your job. You lost the chance to be better. And with that, she turned and walked away, calm, graceful, and stronger than anyone had realized. The words, "You're fired," still echoed in Vanessa's mind like a sharp bell that wouldn't stop ringing. She stood still, lips parted, her carefully styled confidence crumbling in front of everyone. A tear slipped down her cheek, and this time she didn't wipe it away. There was no dignity left to protect. Liana didn't stop walking. She didn't gloat. She didn't look back. The store manager moved beside Vanessa, clearing his throat gently. We'll need your badge and keys. Vanessa flinched, like she'd forgotten he was there. Her hands shook as she reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out her name badge, setting it quietly on the counter. The boutique, once her kingdom, now felt like a stranger's house. She opened her mouth again, barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to ruin everything. I was just doing what we always do. That made the manager pause, but it made Liana stop completely. She turned halfway, just enough to glance back. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was tired, disappointed. Then your always needs to change, she said. Because if mocking people and judging their worth by their clothes is how your store runs, you've already lost. The customers standing nearby looked down, some of them ashamed that they hadn't spoken up either. One woman who had been recording earlier slowly lowered her phone. Vanessa picked up her purse, now looking small in her hands. I've worked here for 6 years, she said, voice breaking. I built my life around this job. And I built this brand on respect, Liana replied softly. And if I let this slide, I'd be breaking everything I promised to stand for. No further words were needed. The manager stepped back, allowing Vanessa to leave on her own. She walked out without the same fire in her steps, no heels clicking proudly, no red lipstick smile, just a quiet, heavy silence behind her. Liana turned to the remaining employees. Treat every person who walks in like they matter, whether they're a millionaire or a student with dreams. That's the new standard. And then she walked back into her suite, not as a guest, but as a leader reshaping the room. Back inside the suite, the quiet returned. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Liana stood near the window, looking out at the busy street below. People moved quickly, not knowing what had just happened inside. They didn't know that something important had shifted, not just for her, but for everyone who watched. A soft knock on the suite door interrupted her thoughts. The younger assistant from earlier stepped inside cautiously. She looked nervous, holding a small tray with tea. I wasn't sure if you, wanted something warm. Liana turned and gave her a soft smile. Thank you. The girl placed the tray down carefully. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry too. I didn't stop her. I should have. Liana nodded. It's hard to speak up when someone louder is doing all the talking. The assistant looked at her wide-eyed. But you did. You didn't even raise your voice. Liana poured herself a cup of tea, her hands steady. You don't have to be loud to be strong. The assistant nodded slowly, as if learning something she'd never been taught in training. Can I ask you something? She said. Why didn't you tell her who you were from the start? Liana stirred her tea gently. Because I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to see how your store treats people when you think they have nothing to offer. The girl looked down. And now you do. Yes, Liana said. And that's the problem. The assistant looked up. When respect is only given to the rich, and kindness is reserved for people in designer clothes, we forget the heart of what fashion is supposed to be, Liana said. It's supposed to be for everyone, not just those who can look the part. She sipped her tea, then added softly, Vanessa didn't lose her job because she was rude to me. She lost it because she was cruel to someone she thought didn't matter. The assistant swallowed hard. Thank you for not yelling, for showing us something different. Liana smiled gently. Sometimes the quietest voices leave the loudest echoes. Vanessa stood just outside the boutique, her back leaning against the stone wall. The city moved around her, cars honked, people laughed, and high heels tapped the sidewalk like they always did. But she didn't hear any of it. All she could hear was her own voice, playing over and over in her head. This place isn't for broke people like you. Put that down! You're making the store look cheap. She probably doesn't even know how to pronounce the brand name. Each word echoed like a bruise she had given herself. She had spent years building a reputation, confidence, sharpness, power, but now, standing out in the cold, stripped of her title and pride, she realized something painful. She had built all of it on the wrong things. Behind her, through the boutique's glass doors, she saw the CEO, moving with quiet grace, still wearing that plain hoodie and those worn-out sneakers. But now Vanessa saw what she hadn't before. Power isn't always loud, wealth isn't always worn, and kindness isn't weakness. Inside, the younger assistant watched from the counter. She had told the others what Liana said, about respect, about being better, about seeing people beyond their clothes. For the first time, the store felt different. The snickering was gone. The whispers had stopped. Liana didn't need to raise her voice. Her actions had spoken louder than any anger ever could. Vanessa turned away from the glass and began to walk slowly. No destination, just movement. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel important. But maybe that was the beginning of something better. Not revenge, not regret, but reflection. Inside the boutique, the employees began quietly refolding scarves and adjusting displays. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't, because everyone who had watched the scene unfold would carry that moment with them. The moment a girl in old sneakers reminded them who truly belonged. The golden sun slipped lower outside the boutique's wide glass windows, casting soft light over the polished floors and quiet displays. The store was still open, but it felt like something had ended. Not the business day, but a certain way of thinking. Liana stepped out of the private suite, holding nothing in her hands. She hadn't come to shop and she hadn't bought a single item. But somehow she left carrying more than most ever would. The younger assistant gave her a small, respectful nod. Thank you, Ms. Ray, she said, voice quiet. Liana smiled warmly. What's your name? Amber. Nice to meet you, Amber, she said. Keep your heart. It's your best accessory. Amber blinked, touched in a way that had nothing to do with designer labels. As Liana made her way to the front of the store, customers gently stepped aside. No one cheered. No one clapped. But they looked at her differently now, not because they knew her title, but because they had seen her truth. She pushed open the door. Outside, the city carried on. No red carpet, no reporters, just the sound of traffic and a breeze that tugged at her hoodie. She paused on the sidewalk. Someone behind her, one of the customers who had witnessed everything, stepped outside too, a middle-aged woman in a smart coat. She looked unsure at first, then spoke. You handled that beautifully. Liana turned. Thank you. The woman hesitated. May I ask, why didn't you walk in wearing something that showed who you were? Liana looked down at her sneakers, then back up. Because I wanted to see who they were. The woman smiled, almost embarrassed she hadn't thought of that. Liana nodded politely and began walking down the street, disappearing into the rhythm of the city. No bodyguards, no flashing lights. Just a girl in old sneakers who had owned the place with nothing but grace. And behind her, in the quiet she left behind, was a lesson, one that would echo far beyond the walls of that store. The next morning, the boutique opened like usual. The displays were perfect. The lights were warm. The scent of fresh flowers floated in the air. But something had changed. The staff moved differently, quieter, more aware. Amber greeted every customer with a genuine smile. She offered water, gave space, and made sure her tone never carried judgment. She kept remembering Liana's words. Keep your heart. It's your best accessory. Vanessa's absence was noticeable, but no one spoke about it out loud. What mattered more was the conversation, now happening in every corner of the store, whispered reflections, second thoughts, and subtle shifts in attitude. That day, customers came and went, some dressed in high-end fashion, others in casual clothes. And for once, no one judged, because the staff had learned a truth that wouldn't fade with the season. A week later, a short article went viral online. The title read, "She walked in wearing old sneakers, but walked out owning the place." It told the story of a young CEO who visited one of her newly acquired boutiques dressed in the simplest of clothes. Not to test, but to see, to witness how people treated others when they thought no one important was watching. The story spread fast, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. In offices, cafes, and classrooms, people whispered, "Did you hear about the girl who got mocked in the store she owns?" And every time they told it, the lesson was the same. Kindness costs nothing. Judgment reveals more about you than the one you judge. And real power, it speaks softly and listens louder. Somewhere in a quiet studio, Liana sat at her desk, sketching designs for the next collection. The worn sneakers were still by the door. Her hoodie was folded neatly on a chair. She smiled to herself, not because the world was watching, but because she knew she had changed it, even just a little. And sometimes a little is all it takes. The end. If this story touched you, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe for more heartfelt tales.